In this Foojay Podcast, we dive into a few articles which were published recently and focus on Java code.
Welcome to the Foojay Podcast, all your news about OpenJDK.
Igor Kulakov of JetBrains gives us insights in the tool he created to find duplicate content in documentation. Rijo Sam explains how you can generate real random values and how he created a train departure display. Maximillian Arruda explains in a very detailed post the different ways to create a complex Java object. And we start with Wim De Troyer, who wrote his first blog post for Foojay, the proper way to define configuration properties in Spring. We talked about the code changes he had to do in a project that got upgraded and how he discovered and solved the problems in that process. And we also discussed whether Lombok should still be used or replaced with Java records.
We did a long overdue migration on one of our applications, which kind of got basically nobody wanted to do it. So I had a fun time in December while it was a bit calm to do that migration. So this application was on Spring Boot 2, and the goal was to bring it to Spring Boot 3. And it managed to compile rather quickly. I used Open Rewrite also a little bit for that, which really helped with the migration. But the problem is that I got some weird runtime errors, and one of them was due to configuration properties, which were bound when I was running the application in Spring Boot 2, no longer being bound when I was running in Spring Boot 3. And that was a very strange issue for me.
Is it really a change in the Spring Boot? So there's a change in Spring Boot which caused this problem?
I compared the release notes of Spring Boot 2 and Spring Boot 3, and I read also through the Java doc of Spring Boot 2 and Spring Boot 3. More specifically, the documentation on configuration binding. And what I found was that in Spring Boot 2, you were more at liberty, let's say, to just define your getters and setters, define a constructor. But now Spring Boot 3 will notice, for instance, that you have a constructor in your properties, and it will assume that you want constructor binding. It will heavily favor constructor binding if there is a constructor to be found. And so what happened in the piece of code that I showed in my article is that I had a constructor which had one argument, one final field, which was picked up by a required args constructor, an annotation which generates a constructor just with the final fields, which is something that Lombok does. And so what happens is Spring thinks it's constructor. Spring assumes you want constructor binding. Spring will bind your configuration properties, but it will only call the constructor which has this one argument. So the only final field that I had. And the other variables that used to be bound in Spring Boot 2 were no longer bound in Spring Boot 3 because the binding only happens via the constructor. And that took a while to debug, but yeah.
You mentioned Lombok. There are a lot of people pro and a lot of people contra.
Yeah.
Was the problem caused by Lombok, or was it not used in the right way, or should Lombok not be used at all?
It's not caused by Lombok, and because Lombok, I guess the thing was that Lombok was misused, and I guess also the thing was that Lombok also masked a little bit the problem for me, because I don't see a constructor. You see an annotation, obviously, so you kind of make that link that there is a constructor, but there's a little bit of an indirection there, so you don't immediately start thinking, there's a constructor, so there's probably constructor binding. So one part of the issue was that it masked the problem a little bit, and then the second part of the problem is that we were already on Java 17, so we already had access to records. That configuration clause was not well designed anyway. It could have been a record. We would not have a need for Lombok. We would not have a need for the getters and setters annotation. No need for the required args constructor. All that is provided for you if you just use records for which they are meant to be used. They're immutable data carriers, and that's exactly what configuration is. You just bind it at startup time, and it's not supposed to change during the run of your application. You're not supposed to change it yourself, at least.
Would you say that Lombok can be removed from, for instance, your project thanks to the records?
There's still a few places where we use, and I would even say abuse Lombok. You have to be careful at the entity layer. You can use Lombok at the entity layer, but you have to watch out using some annotations. I think a lot of developers just blindly copy paste Lombok and just put it on a class without really knowing what they're doing. I think it still has its uses. For instance, I really like the builder annotation that Lombok provides. I think that's very nice, and I think that Java does not really have a nice alternative built into the language. They're working on something, I think, the JDK maintainers for records, which has something similar for records and some sort of builder pattern, but that's not there yet. So I think a lot of things Lombok provides are very useful still, but you just have to know when and how to use them. Like any tool, basically. It's a bit of magic underneath.
And that's a bit what we see in the evolution of Java. Things which were introduced by libraries like Lombok because they were missing in the Java system. Now they get introduced with all the evolution that are happening. Okay.
Exactly.
In your article, you also mentioned BeanValidation. How did it help to solve that specific problem?
As I said, I refactored to a record because that seemed to me like a more maintainable solution. But I was also annoyed by the fact that that solution, luckily, it got caught by tests, not when I launched the application in a test environment or what have you. But this also could have been avoided had we used BeanValidation. And BeanValidation is basically a specification that defines some annotations which you can place on your fields, on your classes, which declaratively provide validation. For instance, not null, not blank on a string when it can't be null or it can't be blank, those sort of things. And it's backed by an implementation. I believe it's a Hibernate validator for Spring. And all of this works very seamlessly in the Spring ecosystem. You just place a dependency and everything works out of the box, basically, with little configuration. You add those variables, and then what you get is startup time safety, which is basically if those variables which you expect to not be null are null during startup time, Spring will simply not boot up.
Yeah, and that's exactly the goal of Spring Boot. They're making a lot of standard things easier that you don't need to do them yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, I love it. I also learned from your post that the file Spring configuration metadata.json gets generated at compile time.
Yes.
What can you do with that file?
So that's a little bit of a bonus because I don't think that really is needed to solve the problem I had at hand. But while you're at it, you might as well include that. That's an annotation processor provided by Spring. You just have to add that on your dependencies at compile time, which basically goes through all your configuration classes, picks up the annotations, and the annotation processor will write at compile time a JSON file, this file name that you mentioned, and it will write some hints, the type of the variables, and this JSON document, which you can also supplement with your own configuration if you wanted to, can be used by, for instance, an IDE to provide auto-completion, to provide click-through, to go immediately from your properties file to a field in your Pojo class. All these nice things, which depending on your IDE are very nice. I know that IntelliJ has really nice support for this, so it's a nice bonus.
Maximillian Arruda is a JUG leader for SuJava in Brazil, an open source contributor to Jakarta and NoSQL, software engineer, and he recently also published his first Foojay post. In this post, Make the life of your developer clients easier with smart object builders, he explains with a lot of details and example code the different ways how you can construct complex Java objects. So the logical first question is, what is a complex object?
Any object that is hard to create in your application. Well, my article is focused on help our customers' clients of your code. Am I right? It's not focused on final solution because when the application is running in production, we are looking for to reach out the goals for our customer clients or end user. Am I right? But as software development in a company that I'm working on, we know that most of the 70% of our times we are managing code, we are maintaining the code, and we are actually using code from another one, and we always facing problem with that because some developers in the past create some code that you need to create, that you need to manage, and so on. And sometimes it's hard to do this because, on the time, the code was not designed to be usable, to bring a easy way to use it. And I think, okay, what is the complex object? Well, is there any object that it's hard to create, it's hard to manage, it's hard to figure out, and sometimes it's hard to create those things, and we need to looking for the source code, you need to looking for the documentation, and you you spend a lot of time with that. Am I right? You spend a lot of time. Then why not to create an object in an easiest way to help our client customers, our developers, to create a good software. So and delegate this responsibility regarding the structure, the way that you are creating your object to the compiler. Compiler is amazing too, that we can get benefits with that, right? So instead of just to try to do by your own. So am I right? Because users, humans put effort in the code. And by the way, am I right? Any kind of bug in a code is put from humans, right? So why not to create an easiest way to use compiler and any kind of tool in our favor? So that's the reason why I think that.
One thing that changed in the direction of the compiler are the records. So we don't need a lot of getters setters anymore.
Yeah.
If you use those new type of Java objects. We had Lombok in the past and still use it in a lot of projects. Do you think that records can replace almost all cases where you have a lot of getter setter code?
Java records is the most, I think, is most utility feature that brings the Java developer a lot of benefits than drawbacks. For example, you can, of course, you don't need more scaffolds to create getters and setters and so on, because I think it is a end pattern. You just put getter and setter in your object because you're broken the, how can I say, the encapsulation concept of your code, of your object. And I think that Java Hack can help developers to create immutable objects. You can, how can I say, instead of to care about the getters, instead you just create your record easiest. And also you can put that thing as a DTO or VO of a value object in your code and so on. I think it fits what you used to do with Pojo in the past. In the article, I get a start from the Pojo because we know that many companies are migrating from Java 11 to Java 17 and 21. It's amazing, but we know that a lot of companies, especially companies that are consolidating the market, has old Java programs, and we need to update them. And just using a feature by just to, okay, I know that is good, I will do that. I think that is more valuable to understand why it's so important, why we need to use that. So that's the reason why I'm getting starting from the Podio to show why it's better to use the records instead of to put getters and setters. I think it's more important thing. This is erase the rule in your team if when we understand how those things happen.
I learned a lot from your article. Can you explain, for instance, what telescopic constructors are? I didn't know the term. I used the way of programming, but I didn't know that there was a name for it. So what is it exactly?
I found out this term in a Java effective book from Joshua Block. And on that time, I thought to myself, oh my God, what is this term? What it means? Because telescope is something that you use to see the stars, the space bodies and so on, for example, the moon and so on. And I realized that, well, when we are creating an object, that we don't need the details of this object, we don't need to zoom on it to create it. Am I right? So a telescope is something that helps you. Okay, I need to create this object in a specific way, so I need to do a zoom on it. I need to figure out their attributes and I can use that. So this is the reason why telescope in name is something related to that. So I love it this way.
And indeed, there are a lot of examples in the article to illustrate it. What I also didn't use a lot in my way of programming is the static factory methods, like you describe. So I really love the examples again that you give, and they really explain it in detail. So, for instance, create a notification with attachment is an object which has a lot more parameters that you can define, but this one will create one for you which has a notification and an attachment. So I think the way of creating these static methods and how you name them in your example really explain how they should be used in the code. Is that the main advantage of this way of creating objects?
Yeah, I think the static method factory is one special one because you can name it. As you said, you can be explicit what we are doing, what we are want. Am I right? And also this kind of factory method, you can get more power from the OOP or oriented or object programming because you don't need to work only with the type that it's resulting because you can change it. You can use some subclass to result of that. So I think that you can get more flexibility. You can put some logic and you can fit with this thing and of course put your code in an explicit way to tell the developer that if you use your method, you understand what's happening. Okay, as you mentioned, creating a notification with attachment. So what I need to create that thing. So and I put some arguments there, and people you fill it in order to create the object. But also it comes with drawbacks. If you have a method like that with a lot of arguments, you will end up with the same drawbacks that you use on a constructor. You need to figure out which arguments you need to put and the order and so on. So I think that's the reason why for few arguments only, this is a good pattern in my opinion. After that, I think another patterns can help you better. As I mentioned, the builder pattern, you can use that to get a flexible and easiest way to create this kind of object using a fluent interface and so on. So, I think this is the way that I try to bring this content.
So should we conclude that a builder pattern is the best solution for really complex objects with a lot of values?
Yeah, it's hard to just say what you need to do, what you don't need to do, because it depends of the context that you're trying to resolve. And sometimes you need to deal with a lot of objects, and sometimes for your team, because you need to consider that. All right, you need to consider your team not just the way that you understand the world, because it's a particular way to see the world. It's a subjective to say that, oh, this object is hard, this object is complex, or this object is not complex. It's depend of your team. You need to understand that most of the people in your team understand what you are doing. This is the key, I think, of the success. It's the key of to keep the code updated. Sometimes the people say, "Oh, I don't like Java because Java is an old one language." But man, if your code is easy to maintain, is bringing money, why not to keep that? You don't need to go to another language to to feel that you are working in a updated programming. You know what I mean? So I think that when your team is aligned with you and the code is normalized in your team, is better solution. So focus on to make your team reach out the goals, because everyone is on the same boat. Am I right?
I agree, because the projects where I have been involved, where rewriting was the goal because we want to change language, yeah, you end up again with an unfinished project, because in that previous project there were certain implementations to solve a specific problem that you maybe don't know anymore. So if you go to another language, you will introduce these same problems which were solved in the past. So I agree that it's better to evolve an existing application and then move from Java 8 to a later one and make use of what's all new in this language. Then restarting from scratch is rarely a good idea, I think.
It's like a microservices applications, am I right? Sometimes we see people getting started from microservices and trying to create a big service, a big solution, put a lot of microservices, but the context is not so well delimited. So why not to get started from the monolith, and after that let the code show the necessities. You know what I mean? So uh, if you are creating an object and this object is hard to create it, maybe you need to put a kind of engineering there to help you, help the people that you manage this object. So this is a complex object that the code showing to you. Am I right? So I think you could to keep those things simple, not simplicity one, but simple, to be maintained, to be grown, and so on. So that's the reason why I think is a good way to get started and reach out your goals. So the success and so on.
One other thing that I found remarkable in your article is that you a few times point out that there is a problem with thread safety. If you're constructing complex objects, that you also need thread safety into account. What can go wrong there?
Threads is something that you need to care about if you are using this kind of solution in a multi-threading programming. And in Java, by the way, is whole created over threads. I'm right. Java, it's tied to threads, and when we got threads, we can share objects between the threads, and it could be brings problems to developers, and the problems that's hard to reproduce. It's hard to find out the way, because sometimes if you don't put those things in a good way, the wrong situation, the invalid state will comes, and you need to figure out where is it, but it's after the problems happen. So it's the worst situation that we got. Am I right? So, but when we are creating the object and we need to share it, we need to care about how to synchronize the way that you read and you write your attributes in the object. When we are creating a builder, probably we are defining the types between the call the build method, and developers can do everything, right? The developers are creative ones, so they could be think, okay, I will create a builder and they will share that between the threads because maybe I can create an object in a how can I say multiple threads and so on. Well, you know what I mean. Developers are creative ones, so but we need to care about that because otherwise we will end up in a undesired situation. So that's the reason why I think that we need to care about that. So if you are creating an object, one rule of thumb that I follow is, never create an object with invalid state, because if you create an invalid state, you will end up in desired situation. So builders is an object that you are in a way to create an object yet, so you need to care about that. So that's the reason why I think threads is something that we need to care about when we are working on, and that's the reason why we are using to recommend to people to use immutable objects, because if you're creating immutable objects, you are safe. You are trade safe, by the way, am I right? Because any thread will change your object and more. So, but if you are creating an object, as I said, using a POJ or playold Java object, you need to care about that. Put some synchronize or maybe lock object and so on, trying to figure out those things. But that's the reason why I put this kind of information just to help the people to understand that. So I don't know if, and maybe I should put more information about that, but I think, well, one friend of mine, when he read the article, he told me, "Oh, Max, you can broke this one in multiple articles. You don't need to put everything in a specific one." But I like to.
It's a pretty long article, but it makes sense because you really build up on you start with a simple object and you make it complexer and you have all the alternatives. So for me, it's a perfect article. You don't need to break it up. Which would be a good case is a second article, a follow-up and more improvements. So we're looking forward to more content of you on Foojay.
Actually, I'm learning a lot about gatherers, APIs. That is an improvement on the Spring API part. So I'm trying to write something there, and pretty soon I will publish that as well. So I must thank for Joe Foojay for this opportunity to share a little bit what I know, because I learn a lot from Foojay, so why not to contribute? So this is the key of the open source and the Foojay. How can I say, help the people to increase their career? So I love it. So thanks so much.
Rijo Sam is a Java chapter lead originally from India and now living in the Netherlands, where he also presents at JUX. He has several articles on Foojay and I selected two of them for this podcast. Let's start with pseudo-random number generator, the secret behind Santa's gift bag. I didn't know Santa is a Java developer.
I was writing this article during the holiday season, and then it's all about Christmas movies and Santa. So then I found, okay, this is a nice correlation with pseudo-random number generators. So I end up comparing those. So the problem here is we always use in programming random number generators. And we use random numbers in all the cryptographic encryption. We use random numbers, but the here important thing we need to understand is the random numbers we are using is not always random. They are always based on an algorithm that appears to be creating random numbers. Same like Santa's gift bag. Like if you look at from outside, Santa is always giving a random gift to the child, but Santa knows exactly which gift to give to which child and which is the next one.
So you're saying that if we're using java.util.Random, what we get is actually not that random.
That's what we call pseudo-random number generator. It's a big word. It's not always random. There is two random number generators that is so hard to use in programming. It's based on natural phenomena and it's a different class. But java.random.util.Random, or the SecureRandom, they all are pseudo-random number generators. And what we are getting is not always random. They are good enough to be random.
Good enough, but this could be a problem if you look into security-related items, correct?
Yes, if we are using java.util.Random, that is not used for security purposes at all. So it's mainly used for where you need efficiency more than security. So for example, if you are creating a game application where you need to mimic the behavior of a dice or a card shuffling, those places you can always use java.util.Random. It's not secure, but it's efficient and fast. But when coming to a cryptographically secure algorithms, we always need to use java.SecureRandom.
So that's always a better choice for everything related to security. So why don't we use it all the time? Because it's less efficient, less fast?
Correct. Whenever there is a cryptography need, we use a SecureRandom. That's the best choice. But the drawback here is it's not that efficient. It will take time. It is not that fast as the other one. So we need to understand something here is all the pseudo-random number generators are based on an initial value called seed. And the main difference between the SecureRandom and java.util.Random, how the seed is selected. In java.util.Random, the seed is selected from the clock of the system. It's always predictable. That's why it's not that secure. The other one, the SecureRandom, always uses some random data from the operating system. That's why it's more secure. And yeah, if we create a SecureRandom instance, it always select an algorithm based on your operating system. And in most cases, I would say you always stick with what we are getting as a default. But if you really want to have a specific use case, you can also select a different algorithm. But here also a catch. When you're selecting a specific algorithm, you need to remember about the blocking behavior of those algorithms. I have an example. A few years ago, when I was working on a project where we encrypt a set of data of customers for an onboarding process. And what we are doing, we collect some data, we encrypt it, and we send it to another external party. So we implement everything and we went live. And during the first day of went live production, we noticed that a lot of customers are getting timeouts. And during the debugging, we found out that by default, we are using a random number generator algorithm, which is blocking in behavior. So what exactly it's doing, it's whenever we have a new request, we ask operating system, hey, I need a random number. And operating system find out that number and give it to us. But when the request is so high, on the first day, the operating system was not able to deliver that much random numbers. Then the request went into wait state and blocking state, and in the end, customers end up in a timeout. So we solved it by moving it to a non-blocking algorithm. Yeah.
So we have to take into account it's slower. It can lead to thread issues, but it will give you a secure random number.
Correct. So even the non-blocking algorithm is less secure than the blocking algorithm. So it's also you need to consider like how security you need, how much security you need, what's your application exactly is.
Okay, and in the blog post you have a few of these algorithms described, like SHA-1 native PRNG, and you have a link I see to all these algorithms and what you can use. So if people are really interested in finding the one that fits their system, they can find it there. Okay.
It's also important, funny thing, if you're working on a Windows laptop, you're selecting an algorithm, you need to make sure that it's also there in your target system. Maybe your server is running on Linux. So that's also important to consider.
Another project that you described on Foojay, it's less technical, it's more fun, it's a private project, and it's, what is the title exactly? Crafting your own railway display with Java. There's a very nice picture in the blog post showing, I think, your living room. Do
Yes.
you really have an old-fashioned station clock in your living room?
Yes, yes. So that project is like really close to my heart, and it's I always have some use for it. Some background. I'm living in near to like 15 minutes from my station by bike, and I like to travel with public transport. Here the situation is if I am not on time, I need to wait a long time for the next train. So we only have trains for in a gap of 30 minutes. So especially this is a problem during winter cold mornings. I need to wait outside. So I thought, okay, this is not working. I need a solution. Then I thought, why can't we create a display with some custom data in my living room so that I can always look. I don't need to open an app, look into the timing, so I can always see what time. So I added some data like status of the train. I can see whether the train is already in the station or not, or like time to departure, like how much time I have the train to catch the train. So, for example, if there is 12 minutes, I can always cycle slowly, and if it's less than 12 minutes, I need to cycle more fast. But it's interesting to see, and it's a nice project. It's still there in my living room,
Okay.
working perfectly.
And what did you use? So it's a user interface application. It really shows a timetable like you see in
Correct.
these displays in the station. What did you use to display it?
I use Vaadin for the backend, Java, Jakarta, and for the UI, it's I use Vaadin.
Did you already use Vaadin before, or is this the first time you created
No,
something like this?
this is my first time using Vaadin. So when we started this project, backend was always fine. Like Java, I can use Java, Jakarta, which I'm really familiar of. But the front end, I need to display something, right? So then I was thinking, okay, what should I use? I'm not a front end developer, and I'm not familiar with those frameworks. I saw React, Angular, JavaScript, all those confusing, and somehow I ended up in Vaadin, which was a lifesaver for a Java developer like me. It was so easy. I can write the code in Java. If you want, you can do some CSS. That's it. Other than that, it was so easy, and their documentation is also clear enough. We can use it simply. I was using few components, and within 1 or 2 hours, I have an initial UI which can display my API a response. So it was so nice for me.
Yeah, I've used Vaadin a long time ago, I think over 15 years, and then found it back a few years ago. And indeed, I really love the framework. It's so easy to create a user interface, a website, fully written in Java, and they have nice components. You can really easily build a layout like that. I like, by the way, how your screen looks like. So it's filled with the train data of the station where you live closest by. How easy was it to get that data in the Netherlands?
It's fairly easy. Like all the data about the Netherlands Dutch Railway is publicly available, and they are well documented with APIs. So you need to go and create an account in the API portal, and then with the API key, you can subscribe to the APIs and just start using it. That's it.
And they give it for free, or only if you have limited use?
Right now is free. I don't think they have a paid plan. We can also get data from other railways via Dutch Railway. That is also possible. I tried with getting some German train data. It's possible with the same APIs. You only need to select the station. You need UIC code of a station. UIC code is a unified code for all the railway stations. And if you have that code of a German railway station, you can try getting it.
It's a pet project. I definitely like it because it looks nice. It really fills a gap for something you needed, and it brings you to a higher nerd level, as I can say, because you did this together with your partner, correct?
Yes, my partner, she's also a Java/Kotlin developer. So we do like something like this to learn projects. So whenever there is something coming up, or we experiment it with together. And this was something. It took some time for us to like. She was in charge of doing the UI part, and I was in charge of doing the backend part. So it's some time. It took some time for us to finish this one. But in the end, it was really nice project working together, learning each other, sharing things, and we were changing it day to day. That's what's interesting. Like we found something. Okay, for example, our stations sometimes have bus instead of train. So they, if a train is cancelled, then they have bus. So we want to display a picture of bus on our display. So we did that. There are many different things. We can now switch to any station in Netherlands. I can also do some train sporting if I want. I can move it to Amsterdam and see, okay, what are the trains going from Amsterdam. So it took some time, but we really enjoy the process working together.
Yeah, I think it's a very good approach to learn one new thing in each project. So in this case, it was Vaadin for you
Yeah.
and for your partner. So it's really great that you have this kind of project together and create such an amazing tool. You're also running it on a Raspberry Pi, correct?
Correct. Some Foojay articles were really helpful. That's the first time we are setting up Raspberry Pi. When we were running, we created the project. We had, okay, we need to figure out where we need to run. We need to put it into cloud or we need to do. Cloud is not that financially good. So we thought, okay, why can't we run it in a Raspberry Pi in our system? So we purchased a Raspberry Pi, we installed Java with SDKman, and then yeah, it was working easily. Even we did some debugging in Raspberry Pi with the Visual Studio provided in Raspberry Pi. So it's already up on the wall. So Raspberry Pi is also fitted. So we have a remote keyboard and mouse which is connected to the Raspberry Pi. And if you want to make some code changes, we can actually do in the Raspberry Pi if you want.
What is the next project? What will it look like? Already have something?
We have few ideas, but not yet concrete to share. But probably we will share it in our next Foojay article in the coming months. So we were working on it. Yeah.
Igor Kulakov is a technical writer at JetBrains focusing on IntelliJ IDE. He is also a hobbyist developer and is working on a tool to find duplicate content in documentation sets. He wrote about his project on Foojay and I asked him what challenge he wants to solve.
The blog post talks about one of my pet projects. It's a long-running one because I've been technical writing since 2016, and ever since this time, I was facing this challenge of duplicate content because first I didn't have tools to reuse it, like when you write something once, and then when you need a similar chunk of content somewhere else, then you just include that. It turns out that's not the only challenge because the other part and more hard one is finding what to extract to a reusable component or a reusable snippet of text, because especially in big teams, it happens that many people write something similar, and due to lack of communication or due to like organizational differences, just those people don't know they are working on something similar.
So you want to avoid that the same text is written a bit different on another place, so you want to find all the spots with similar content that you can unify it, correct?
Yes, it aligns with dry principle. Don't repeat yourself. Yeah. Of course, it gets overused and abused sometimes because you cannot extract everything to a reusable component. But some things that you definitely need to extract. And this not only applies to programming, this also applies to content.
How do you run this? Is this part of your build process of generating docs, or is it a tool you run from time to time just to find these spots?
For now, it's just a standalone utility that you can, of course, you can run it on CI with every build, or it has like a user interface which you can use like for a periodic inspection of your sources. I use it once in a while, so that's not a like regular routine. There is an ongoing effort to integrate this into writer side. Like in JetBrains, we have an authoring tool called Writer Side. It's now early access. And what we want to do is to make this tool highlight duplicate or fuzzy matches are right as you type. So you don't have to run anything specifically. You just do your technical writing or content writing, or you write some content, and then the tool automatically notifies you that something similar is present elsewhere in other module, in other file, depending on the settings.
In the blog post, you've taken a test-first approach, so you define some text fragments that are pretty similar and then try to find similarities. Isn't that a difficult thing with text? It could be so large and so, yeah, if there's one word different, is it already different enough? How do you define how similar it should be?
There are several parts to recognizing, to determining if text is a duplicate or not, because first is chunking, because if you have a very big, very large document, then part of it might be 100% similar, and the rest of the document might differ. So the first question is how to chunk that, because with structured content, it's easier. For example, with XML, you can take XML tag as basic unit, and with JSON, that's also easy. But then you have like plain text. For plain text, which unit of text should be basic, like a paragraph, or maybe it's written without paragraphs at all. Then how do you recognize if a sentence uses different wording, but the meaning is the same? For example, if one word changed, is it already different or not? So I took a very basic approach, very similar to fuzzy search, which doesn't account for differences in wording with similar meaning. So of course we could like do it using embeddings and parse to try to understand semantics of text first and then compare it. But I decided to go with a more basic approach to compare just lexicographically, like not letter by letter, but something similar.
And I guess a lot cheaper than using some AI system behind it to really try to figure out if it's the same content based on feeling or whatever is important there. So you don't need AI. That means that everything just runs in Java logic. So there's no external service called, correct?
That's absolutely correct. But now with local models, we can do everything locally, and probably, but that would still be slower. Probably next step would be coarse filtering with just basic algorithm, finding some candidates for deduplication, and then running AI over them, because then the number of things to check would be much smaller, and then it would be quicker and more efficient, and we could probably even use something external for that if that gives better quality. So I think there is no contradiction between these two approaches. They could be used alongside.
What kind of input can you give to the tool? Is it XML, JSON, HTML, whatever? What can it handle?
For now, it's XML, plain text, a Markdown, and a Markdown X. And that's it, but I'm planning to add more types of sources. For example, I was surprised, but that's a very popular request for Google spreadsheets and Excel tables, because people are often asking on forums, like, how do I find cells that are similar, not identical, like 80% similar? So that seems to be a valid request, and I'm planning on adding this soon.
It's very hard in a podcast to go through the sources, but luckily you have added a lot of source examples in the blog post. Can you maybe describe what was important and what you highlighted in that blog post?
This was the second part of the series. First was the introduction, and the second one, the one we are talking about, is about requirements. So I decided to start by writing tests. I usually don't do that, but in this project, I was lucky enough to have because I thought about requirements for a while, and I knew that these core requirements would not change, and you basically can, in this case, you can set in stone, or rather in code, these requirements, and it works well because. As I said before, I'm not a professional developer, but I have an impression that many software projects suffer from vague requirements or ever-changing requirements,
Oh, yeah.
and this probably makes it difficult to make tests like that would make a specification for the lifetime of the application of the project. But in this project, first it's relatively simple, and second, I knew requirements in advance, so I decided to start by writing tests. That's not test-driven development exactly, but something like that. So that would not only allow me to catch regressions afterwards, but that's also kind of declaration that the app should work this way.
You say it's a part of a series, so there is a next part coming about the app?
Yes, the next part I want to dedicate to the actual implementation of the algorithm. By the way, it's already on GitHub and it's open source, so you can, if you're curious, you can familiarize yourself with the sources. And in the next part, I want to dive into implementation, but I'm still thinking how to do that because I want to ideally make that interactive so that people can not only see pictures and read paragraphs, but probably play around with some of the parts of the algorithm right in the browser. And I'm thinking whether to write that in JavaScript or just a toy application in the browser, just to showcase how the algorithm works. And the primary application, the project itself, is in Kotlin, but that doesn't affect how algorithm works. Probably one more way to implement that could be Kotlin compiled to WebAssembly, but I haven't yet started. I'm very excited about this technology, but I haven't yet started with it, and I don't yet know if it's possible for browser to read local files, because apparently some browsers allow that and some are not. Some don't allow that. So yeah, I want to play around and find what's the best solution, and yeah, then I will publish the next part. There will be one more about optimization. That's my favorite part because I'm very keen on optimizing things. Of course, you can optimize it forever, and there is some low-level stuff which I know nothing about, but it's very, very rewarding to make some basic optimizations to see your app gain in speed like 5x just because you improved your equals or hash code method.
Yeah, because you've taken the test first approach, you can really do these benchmarks. If you change your implementation, you can really test if things are faster.
Yes, but that's at the same time, that's a little bit complicated because the application is I/O bound. So if operating system is reluctant to give files, then the benchmark is screwed, and it's very inconsistent. It can fluctuate like plus minus 1 second, and sometimes it can be several seconds.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for your blog post, for the detailed description. Looking forward to the next episodes. And thank you for contributing your content to Foojay.
Thank you too, and thank you for having me on your podcast.
Thanks to my guests for their amazing content on Foojay.io and joining this podcast. Thank you for listening. Please subscribe in your podcast app or on YouTube. Keep an eye on Foojay for future articles and podcasts about development and everything related to the Java world. See you!
Give me a foo, give me a J, give me the friends of OpenJDK.